Live from the Talking Joe studios, it's Talking Joe.
Talking Joe weekly podcast. Talking Joe is there. Talking Joe thought we would last. Talking Joe is there. Find each other like a married couple. Our podcast on the air. Talking Joe is there.
Talking Joe is the code name for a completely untrained special podcast force. Its purpose, to produce a regular comic review show while breaking and replacing a series of presenters from across the world.
Talking Joe. Talking Joe is there. Talking Joe. We are on our soapbox. Nobody seems to care. Fighting for fandom wherever there's trouble. The podcast on the air. Talking Joe is there. Talking Joe. Talking Joe.
Talking Joe is on the air.
Hey, it's me, Mark, and welcome to Talking Joe, the best and longest running dedicated G.I. Joe comics podcast. At least that's what my mother says. If you're new to the show, you can find out all of the details over at the website talkingjoe.co.uk. Today we will be looking at G.I. Joe issue 284 with a very special guest. But before we do that, let me introduce the Judge Dredd to my Walter the Robot. Ooh, that's niche. It's my co-host, a real American Tim. It's Tim Finn.
Hello, Mark, and hello, listeners. And as an American, I can tell you flatly, that the only Judge Dredd comics I've read are some of the team-ups with Batman.
They're good. The first one. Ooh, Simon Bisley. Lovely. And before we do our chit-chat, we've got someone with us. Let's introduce him. Today we have Chuck X. Goran, the general at the Option38.com website. Hello, Chuck. How are you doing?
Hello. Doing well, thank you. I appreciate you guys reaching out to me and including me on this. This is my first foray into a podcast, so really excited to be here, and let's see what happens.
Mark, would it be helpful for our listeners who aren't so familiar with Chuck to give them the quick rundown of Option 38?
Well, I'll give you my plotted one, and then I think Chuck can fill in the details because I want to find out more. But it's essentially, I stumbled upon the Option 38 website and Facebook feed just as part of my general research, and it became my go-to destination, really, for looking at reviews, because it's exhaustive in terms of content, but also very current and up to date, covering all of the G.I. Joe issues as they come out, and well structured, well thought out. And I know that they're well thought out because generally they chime with what I'm thinking. And yeah, it was a good place when I was doing the podcast for checking to see if there was any sort of themes, ideas, Easter eggs that I should be talking about that I had missed. And typically I would give myself a little pat on the back that generally I hadn't. And if there was something particularly good that I had picked up that Chuck had missed, I'd sort of give myself a mental high five and say, yes, I am doing nerding well.
Mark, do you think that Chuck at Option 38 has reviews of comics besides G.I. Joe, like Batman, Judge Dredd crossovers?
Rather than me talk about what I think the website covers, let's turn over to Chuck, and he can talk us through the website. So what was the genesis, and what does it cover? What do you decide to include and not include?
Well, I actually started the website in probably the late 90s or even around 2000. And it was just, I used my real name. It was a different domain name back then. And I just rambled about all kinds of stuff back then. Local sports, I did comic books, I did music shows I'd gone to, bad jokes, random slice of life stuff. And it just wasn't finding an audience. I really didn't know what I was doing. And then probably around 2007 or so, I'd get busted when I go on dates or employers or job interviews, and people would know about me and all my quirky little funny hobbies. And that kind of threw me off because I was like, well, I'll tell you about that stuff when I get to it. So around that time, I refocused my website into just specifically on comics and G.I. Joe in particular. And I would also do first issue reviews because first issues are the most important thing in the world for comic collectors. So I would find random things that I would review there. Before I jumped to first issues, I would just do random bargain bin comics I had found. Like, for instance, there was one time I did a real in-depth article about old issue of Power Man Iron Fist where they become truckers for an issue. And it was really a little too ticky-tacky. I get too detailed, and my columns were so super long. So when I relaunched as Option38 in 2007, I took a more laid-back approach to things and had a lot more fun with it. Because I figure you could spend 15-20 minutes reading a comic book or spend 20 to 30 reading my article. So that's why I took a more laid-back approach to it. And also around 2007, when I streamlined things, that summer I had just met Sergeant Slaughter at the San Diego Comic Convention. He put me in the Cobra clutch, not the camel clutch, the Cobra clutch. And I've just had a lot of enthusiasm for G.I. Joe. It rekindled my old love of G.I. Joe. And I thought, hey, why not go through and redo all the comic books issue by issue? And that's what I did then.
And how was it that you actually got into G.I. Joe?
And so my love and appreciation of G.I. Joe actually stretched back to the 70s. I had a older brother. He was 6 years older than me. And he was into the 12-inch G.I. Joes, the adventure team, if you will, which were kind of like Barbie dolls for boys. So I knew of those. I knew about those. We played with those and was very well aware of G.I. Joe. And so it kind of faded away by the end of the 70s. And then one morning in 1982, I was getting ready for school. I remember I was watching the local Blinky the Clown show, and this commercial came on. It was really bright and loud. It had this really cool animation, and it's talking about the legend of G.I. Joe, and I was like, the legend? Wow.
Here it is, the legend of G.I. Joe.
He'll fight for freedom wherever there's trouble. G.I. Joe is there.
It's Cobra, stop
He never gives up, he'll stay till the fight's won. G.I. Joe will dare. He's America's best, he's in control. He's a man who's tough and bold.
Go get him,
He's
Joe!
his name, the legend of G.I. Joe.
G.I. Joe figures, collect them all. Figures and equipment sold separately, tank batteries not included, from Hasbro.
That's taking me back to the 70s, and I remember those big G.I. Joes my brother used to play with. Wow, it looks like this is being redone for the 80s. How awesome is that? So at that point, I was really interested. I started buying the figures a few weeks later. I think I found Breaker and Short Fuse. Those were my first two figures I bought. I like Breaker because he seemed to be the star of the first toy commercial. When they say, get Breaker, he can do it. And they put him on the Ram, and he does whatever mission those kids were playing with on that first toy commercial. And then I like Short Fuse because he had that cool visor. And after that, it was my thing. It was on. It surpassed all my other toy hobbies as a kid. I spent all my allowance, paper route money, and birthday money buying G.I. Joe stuff and the comics. I think in the first 5 or 6 years of G.I. Joe toys, there was maybe a few things I didn't buy, and that was like those battle packs or some little small stuff. And for the comic, I started following it with issue 8 monthly, and lasted up through 1994. I followed it on a monthly basis when it ended. So a pretty long and robust experience with G.I. Joe.
Chuck, do you have long boxes? Do you go to a comic book store? Do you do mail order? Do you read comics on a tablet?
Oh yeah, after long boxes. I've got probably 34 long boxes, some located somewhere. I had always known about comics since I was as far back as I can remember. They were in fact the reason I spurred myself to learn to read as a human. When I was a little kid, we would have random comic books around the house, superheroes, Star Wars, a lot of Avengers comics. We always just floating around the house, random stuff. And whenever I would get a comic somewhere, at a spinner rack, at a convenience store, grocery store, what have you, I would always say, I asked my parents or my brother to read it for me, and I'd have to wait until they could read it to me. So that was the reason I was like, I don't want to wait. I want to learn to read on my own. So comics helped me to read. I didn't really become a collector until that G.I. Joe issue 8 that I found one day. And when I did, I started collecting Avengers a lot more, getting back into the superheroes. And I think probably about less than 2 years after that first G.I. Joe issue, Marvel launched that Secret Wars, and that's when I got into all of the whole Marvel universe, if you will, and just started really expanding my collection, going back, finding older stuff, buying new stuff on a monthly basis, and that even continues up until today. Nowadays, I only get G.I. Joe from just the one issue a month or whenever it comes out, and I get Avengers through the mail through a direct subscription.
Did you buy issue 1 of G.I. Joe in '82?
So yeah, I didn't buy issue 1 right when it came out. We live in the suburbs, and all we had around us was a grocery store, a mall, and a Target, and neither of those sold comics as they came out. So I didn't get issue 1 right then. I excuse me. I actually eventually found it at a Target book rack with some other Golden books, other Kitty books. I found the Special Treasury Edition, which I think was just #1 re-released, and so I bought that there. And this was probably about 2 or 3 months after I bought my first issue #8. So I did buy issue 1 when it was fairly new, but not when it was exactly new. Oh, and I got that first issue of G.I. Joe that I bought, issue #8. I actually found that at a Walden Books, that mall that was in my neighborhood. They started selling comic books around that time. They just have a very small lot they would throw on the bottom shelf or magazine rack. And I stumbled in there one day and found #8. And good old Walden Books got me hooked on everything.
Not the first person that we have spoken to on this podcast, or who is speaking right now, who got their first issue of G.I. Joe at a Walden Books.
And also not the first person we've spoken to whose first figure is Breaker. I think that was also Jay and John Thurman also had started with Breaker.
Chuck, are you visiting a comic book store regularly nowadays?
Yeah, nowadays I don't really visit a comic book store that often. I go once a month, maybe less, to see a local store out here. I just buy my G.I. Joe issue, I go in and pay it, and I'm out. It's this particular store I think is actually pretty decent. This will kind of give away where I live, but that's all right. It's All C's Collectibles out in Aurora, Colorado. C as in Charlie. Now, like I said, nowadays I just get my G.I. Joe monthly book there, but I actually stumbled onto this store when I was delivering tortillas back in 1994, and I'd go there sporadically ever since. It wasn't my main store. There was another store that's closed down. I would, from about 1999 up until 2013, I would ride my bike to the store every week, and biking, cycling, if you will, is my other hobby, another one of my hobbies. And I would, it was kind of cool because each hobby was spurring the other. I would bike to read comic books, and I would read comic books because I was biking. So it was kind of fun how that worked together. Back then I had a pull list, and so I would probably spend about $30-40 a month on comics back then. Plus the random forays out into the collectible market to buy some back issues and find some just random fun stuff.
And specifically around your website, it's pretty comprehensive in terms of covering every single issue of the Larry Hama era. I think all the special missions and bits and bobs, besides including G.I. Joe stuff and the odd random nugget in there as well. I think you talked about, like, for example, the Storm miniseries by Warren Ellis, I think it was. Yeah, how's that experience been for you? Yeah, it sounded like you started in 2007, so you've been going for 14 years.
Yeah, it was relaunched in 2007 when I sort of rebranded and I became anonymous. I didn't want my real name out there. Before, like in 2000 or so, I wanted my real name, wanted to be famous, want everyone to know me, and I realized that's probably not a good idea. So 2007, I became a little more anonymous with starting the G.I. Joe reviews and comic book reviews in general. And I adopted the silly moniker of Chuck X. Warren. which, as you guys probably know, is the file name of the bridge layer driver, toll booth. And I just thought it was such a funny name. I like that X stood for nothing. And so it was kind of a really obscure character. So I used that as my pseudonym, if you will, for writing the website. But when you go on the website, I'm actually on there as General Flag. That's just the admin name. I thought that sounded cool.
Chuck, do you also have G.I. Joe episodes on DVD and a toy collection?
I'll say yes and yes. Fan of both the cartoon and the comic. The cartoon, not so much. I remember when it first came on, another one of those flashback stories. I was coming home from school one day. I turned on we had one of those old TVs. You turn it on. It took like about a minute for it to fire up to get the picture. And so I came on probably about after school one day around 3:45, turn it on. I hear some noise going on. Meanwhile, I walk in the kitchen to get myself a snack. And then I come back and I hear that dun 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 dun. And I'm like, G.I. Joe will return. And I was like, oh my God. I think I squealed and said, it's a show. I was so happy that G.I. Joe was finally a show. And of course, that snippet I caught was the first 5-parter. I think the Mass Device, or I think it's just called G.I. Joe, a Real American Hero in some markets. And so, yeah, I think I caught like the third episode that I caught. And I was like, wow, this has been on for a while. And I remember came back from commercial.
Now, back to G.I. Joe.
And there was Snake Eyes doing cool stuff. I was like, oh, awesome. They've got Snake Eyes doing Snake Eyes stuff. I love this show. Snake Eyes was like carrying a radioactive container, and that he meets that old guy fighting a bear. I thought this was so cool. It was very exciting. But then when the cartoon finally became daily in 1985, I remember being a little disappointed because I wasn't seeing as much cool Snake Eyes stuff every day, and it was very different from the comic books and the own little world I created for G.I. Joe in my head. They were more like the Super Friends as opposed to like this secret special missions force. So that's why I wasn't a huge fan of the cartoon, but I would rather watch that than Woody Woodpecker or any of the other countless reruns that were on TV during the 80s. The toys, yeah, like I said, I was a huge collector of the toys up until 1991 or so. I remember I was a senior in high school, and just for kind of like a joke gift, somebody got me the Sonic Fighter Apache. I remember it was kind of a fun toy. We opened up that night, my brother, dad, and I, and we were playing around with it. We thought it was kind of a neat toy, but I realized that G.I. Joe had kind of changed since then. They're more like toys with foam missiles and sounds and stuff. It wasn't really the stuff I had started out with. And obviously I was getting pretty old at that time, so I wasn't really into toys anymore. I think the switch for me was I started collecting probably around probably when I was in 6th or 7th grade. It became much more of a collecting thing instead of a playing with toys kind of thing. So that was a huge deal. And then even in my adult life, when they had the re-releases, like the 1997 15th anniversary, I remember seeing that and just thinking it was so cool to buy. And then I had some other things along the way since 1997, like the Spy Troops, and they came out. I bought a few of those. Really became a big fan of the modern toys when they released those 2-packs with the half-issue comics and other things. That was like around 2007 or so, which also led into the renewed enthusiasm on the website and everything. Yeah, I even had the flag, the USS Flag back in the day, but it was actually a traumatic experience for me when I got it. I didn't understand the full size of the actual thing. I had every G.I. Joe thing. I'd buy it just out of tradition almost for up till then. I was like, oh, I have to get this aircraft carrier. That looks sweet. And I just thought, oh yeah, it's big. I'll just slide it underneath my bed or underneath my toy rack. No problem. It'll fit. Yeah, I got to get that aircraft carrier. And so I got it for Christmas, and then we set it up in our living room. It took up like almost the whole living room. And then I remember my dad turning to me and saying, all right, we have to get this in your room. And I just, oh no. And I thought, where's this going to fit in my room? This thing's gigantic. And so it kind of traumatized me because we had to go in like that Christmas evening. We spent afternoon even. We spent just cramming my room and reorganizing everything, and it kind of just freaked me out. We pushed my bunk bed in the corner, and then I remember for the next 6 months or so, I would wake up and there was like 6 inches between my bed and the USS Flag, so it was really there, just taking up my whole room. And I was a little disappointed because it was basically just a big shelf for the Sky Striker, and a lot of this space this space being eaten up in my room. That's not to say I really. There were some cool parts about the Flag as well, like that cool little 2-level command center with the bridge and all that. I really liked that. That was pretty neat. But still, just having this thing always there, even as, day and night, right next to my bed, was a little freaky for me. But probably about 6 months after that, we actually moved all my G.I. Joe stuff down to the basement. Had a lot more free space down there. And 2 years later, when I got the Defiant, I really loved that thing. That thing was gigantic, but I liked it because every inch of it was being used and there was no wasted space. So I was over my trauma, hopefully, by that time.
This is interesting. The first time that I've heard someone who got the Flag and it was not a purely positive experience. But I can see how in a very small room or a very small home, it could backfire. And it's less about like freedom and celebrating your collection and your imagination, and more about making you
strain. Yeah.
Putting a strain on the space of your room.
Excellent. As a sort of someone who's building up my collection again, those vehicles, they present a little bit of a dilemma for me because, I love, for example, the hydrofoil. I love the whale. These are incredible toys, but I don't have the space to put them anywhere. I would literally get them and then immediately put them in the attic, which seems like a ridiculous waste. So so I'm just limiting myself to figures at the moment, unfortunately. A question for you, Chuck. Bringing it back to the website. Where's the name Option38 come from? Does it have a special meaning?
Well, the actual name Option38, it's is the name of a comic book I had started. Well, not a comic book, so I never published it, but it was the name of some cartoons and comics I would draw going back to when I was probably 13 or 14. They started out as very inspired by G.I. Joe. I like to draw little cartoon animals. I think Anthropomorphs is the official name for it. As a young age, I was really inspired by DC's Captain Carrot and the Amazing Zoo Crew comics. I like that style and kind of cartoon animals doing people things. I was really a fan of that. And so I made all these characters that were clearly inspired by G.I. Joe. For instance, I had a guy named, it was sort of rip-off of Alpine, and his name was Boulder. So you can kind of see the connection there. I think my Boulder was a pika, though, a little animal. I also had my Snake Eyes stand-in. His name was Sundown, but he even had the Arashikage symbol on his shirt in the upper left corner. So it was just my way of still having fun with G.I. Joe, but doing it on my terms and doing my own little characters. So I named these guys, originally I called them the Fast Action Response Team, which is a pretty fun acronym. And then I thought as I got older, I couldn't really market that. I don't think I could have a comic book with that acronym and do well. So I came up with the name Option38, which was like, they are the, in this little world I have, it's a post-apocalyptic world run by animals, because I was a big fan of post-apocalyptic movies as a kid. In this new world, in my mind, the government would have options of negotiation when there's a conflict. So like first option, we talk to them. Second option, we bribe them, blah, 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 all the way down to 38. And 38 was your last option. That's when you call in the Fast Action Response Team. And so I just, Option 38, the Fast Action Response Team, or just Option 38. Now, I would like draw their little adventures over the years and little comics I made just for myself. I'd work them in my art projects in school. I'd throw the characters in there without really any explanation. But so I would very much kept doing it. My intent with the website was to eventually have Option38.com be like a webcomic for these guys. But I've had a domain name for almost 20 years now, and it hasn't happened. So I think they're still in my mind. And they may make an appearance one day, but for now they're not. And so that's where the name Option38 comes from.
That explanation pleases me because I always thought that I was being dense and missing some really obvious sort of cultural joke in the title, and thinking I'm just failing some on my geek creds here that I don't know what it means. And in terms of assembling your website and doing all of these sort of reviews and looking at all of the details of all of these issues, up to starting at 1, I guess, and working your way up to 284 will be next. How was that experience, and did you find almost a new appreciation for the content by forcing yourself to kind of look at it in that micro detail rather than just purely as a I guess reading experience?
Yes, I did find a new appreciation for the comics. I discovered there were a lot of Hama's little Hama-isms, if you will, and the way he writes. I found those were bleeding over into G.I. Joe from some of his other works. For instance, back in the 70s, he did one of the Marvel anthology books with some of the first stories about Iron Fist. And I thought a lot of that mysticism, martial arts action that he touched upon in Iron Fist, he actually brought over into G.I. Joe with the ninja stuff and obviously Snake Eyes, Storm Shadow, etc. And a really interesting thing, well, to me it was interesting, that a whole new appreciation for the G.I. Joe comics, going back indexing them. Somebody on the website once contacted me about the character Raptor. I always thought Raptor was kind of a ridiculous throwaway character, but somebody told me that there were a lot of similarities between Raptor and the character of Dean Moriarty from Jack Kerouac's On the Road. And that was something I never caught the first time through. And even when I would read some of the old issues with Raptor when I was in my teens and 20s, I never caught that. But here it was, I was much older, and I was like, oh, I had never seen that before. Hama actually is giving a little reference to Jack Kerouac's writing with Raptor. I think Raptor would say, yes, yes, like Dean Moriarty would say in the book, and also because Raptor is based in Denver, which is where most of On the Road was set. So that really gave me a whole new appreciation, as well as the little triviata and stuff I'd missed before.
Shall we talk the new issue of G.I. Joe?
Let's do it.
Comic talk, oh, comic talk. Larry Hama writes them, Tim and Mark discuss them, whoa. Comic talk, oh, comic talk. Larry Hama writes them, Tim and Mark discuss them, whoa.
Okay, so G.I. Joe, A Real American Hero, issue 284, released 14th of July 2021, although possibly not distributed to everywhere that week. That is what it is. It's interior dated June 2021, so I think we've still got the distribution problems kind of bearing fruit in terms of the way that it looks as published, but there we go. The writer, as always, is Larry Hama. Artist, Andrew Lee Griffiths. Color with no S. Colors, Jay Brown. Letters, Neil Utaki. Senior editor, Tom Waltz. Editor, Megan Brown. And research specialist is Diana Davis. This is Murder by Assassination Part 4. Let's look at those things that they put on the front of the books.
Let's have a look at the covers in the gallery.
Cover A is drawn by Andrew Lee Griffith with colors by Jay Brown, and it's Hawk, Stalker, Snake Eyes, and Scarlet hopping out or having hopped out of a tomahawk. We are on the ground. There's some. We're in a ravine. There are bullets flying into the scene, and we can see the rotor blades whirring at the top behind the logo. This cover, it's daytime, and it's in a modern comics rendered coloring style, and Andrew Lee Griffith doesn't spot many blacks. There's just a little bit on Snake Eyes. This cover reminds me very much of the cover to G.I. Joe 111, which is by Lee Weeks and is set during the Gulf Crisis storyline in Trousseau Abysmia, where we have a helicopter, and Scarlet, Snake Eyes, Jinx, and Storm Shadow have just hopped out of this helicopter, and we're similarly looking up. And
That's a really good spot. I wonder if that's intentional.
I don't know. If I was to guess, I would say no. But they are like, if you squint and conceptually similar. I in a previous episode I said that I wish Andrew Lee Griffith differentiated a little bit more in his inking between thin lines and thick lines, or thin, medium, and thick lines. Sort of all of his lines are thin, and that puts an additional sort of pressure on colors to separate elements, right? And so in the cover to 284, Scarlet has, bright red hair and also this very bright highlight on the top of her head, and then this very thin black line that separates her from Stalker behind her. He's like 5 or 10 feet behind her, and a much thicker black line at the top of her hair would separate them more. And what Jay Brown does here to push Stalker back is he adds a haze, sort of like a very fine mist of white or gray, which is a kind of atmospheric perspective, which pushes Stalker back. And that is one solution, and it does logically fit here because there's smoke and dust being kicked up. But in a lot of modern comics with busy images and busy covers, colorists do this, and I find it a little artificial. And part of why I mentioned the cover to 111 is because though it is less busy, so it's not a perfectly fair comparison, right? There's basically no background. There's just like blue sky or pink cloud with a tiny bit of white highlight on the cloud, right? And it's, the cover to 284 is maybe more exciting because it's more immediate. We're on the ground. There's sort of a greater sense of danger. There's more drama in the sky with some clouds. There's, this smoke and this dust. But I've talked about how I like old school art and old school coloring, and this comparison is pretty keen here, where the Lee Weeks cover from 1991, there are very few colors, right? Like Snake Eyes is just all flat one color, like this very, very dark blue, dark gray, and he's got a little bit of a highlight on his back, right? Jinx is just all red with a little bit of spotted black, right? There's no rendering on Scarlet. She's just 3 colors: red, orange yellow, and light purple. And because it's less busy, it reads a little more clearly. Because there's less going on, it takes less time to sort of like decipher the cover. Snake Eyes' hand and Uzi gets a little lost up against the turbine at the top of the tomahawk, and a different treatment of color and line weight would help separate those elements. I do like this cover, but that is an example of how like modern, inking and coloring is less my favorite. This one works as that example. In both G.I. Joe 111 and 284, Snake Eyes is firing his Uzi lefty. And this is something that I think about when I'm drawing characters. Sometimes the composition sort of calls for a character to be holding their weapon in their left hand, and it's easier to sort of not think about it. But statistically, many more people are right-handed, and so I often then have to tell myself, no, this character needs to be holding their weapon or opening a door or whatever it is with their right hand. Certainly Snake Eyes, is going to have a sword in one hand and a gun in the other, and a lot of the Joes are going to have maybe 2 weapons. So I'm not calling this out as any kind of mistake, but rather an example of just how great Snake Eyes is, that he is ambidextrous. As a tiny contrast, the cover B of issue 284 has Snake Eyes holding his machine gun in his right hand and his sword in his left hand. So if we take these cover images, which are not story but just images, as some kind of canon, and Snake Eyes is definitely ambidextrous. Chuck, you want to jump in on the cover to 284?
Well, one thing I caught fairly randomly was I thought the main cover there with the tomahawk reminded me of G.I. Joe European Missions number 5. That one just has the tomahawk at a different angle. Also has Snake Eyes jumping out of the tomahawk, and there's even a guy with a beret. In 284, it's Stalker. In European Missions number 5, it's actually Flint. So I think that was another not an intentional connection, just one that kind of a little happy accident, if you will.
Yeah. I just typed in European Missions 5 into Google, and the first the top entry is Option38. Imagine that. My note on the cover A is probably that Scarlet just looks a little bit off in terms of just shooting with her right hand and holding another pistol in her left. Just doesn't quite scan right for me. But I think that's my only qualm really about the cover.
Do you mean it's unrealistic to be handling two firearms like that, or do you mean something in the anatomy or something in the perspective?
I think it's something.
Off?
It's a little bit something in the way that you would handle a firearm, and the heft that gun has in the image makes you think that she would want to be using two hands to manipulate it. But also compositionally, it looks just. It just doesn't quite scan right to me. That it looks to me like she needs to be holding that gun rather than having the left arm sort of off on the tangent that it's got. I don't know.
I think I have thought about this since the film Barbed Wire was released. What was that? 95? I can't remember. Based on a comic book, and I think that's the first time that someone pointed out to me that it's actually really difficult to have a pistol in both hands, and that your accuracy goes down significantly, and that I don't know if this was someone I knew who knew someone in law enforcement or in the military, but you have your other hand to steady your weapon, and we see all these action movies and comic book covers where cool characters have like two machine guns or two small firearms.
Yeah, and a submachine gun much more so than just dual wielding pistols. The weight of it and the I guess the recoil and so on.
Yeah, I think I agree with you that Scarlet on 284 probably needs to drop that sidearm and use both hands. At the same time, since it's a cover and not a scene in an issue, I do give it more leeway to be sort of a fantasy and an exaggeration. But I take your point, and there is a handle for that for her other hand.
Well, and maybe that's part of the equation as to why it strikes me as looking a bit off. The fact that it's got such a pronounced handle on that particular weapon, and also let's note for the record as well that unfortunately this is another issue where our cover A does not tie into the interior of the issue.
Yes.
And news update on cover A. Is it an homage or is it a coincidence in the composition? Andrew Griffiths has replied to me and said, coincidence. I was familiar with that cover when I was younger, but didn't have it in mind when drawing mine, and saw it later and saw the similarities. If it was an homage, I would have proudly straight up said so. Also would have made it match up better. I'm very literal thinking when I do homages. Would have driven me crazy making intentionally similar yet keeping it so different.
That's cool that while we were talking you fired off a message and Andrew Lee Griffith replied.
Cover B by Freddie Williams II and colours by Andrew Dalhouse.
So this is part 4 of 5 of this 5 parts connecting horizontal panoramic shot, 5 covers in a row that connect. Snake Eyes as throwdown Snake Eyes, right? Because he's got the slightly different helmet, is lunging toward us, and with his left hand forward holding a sword, chopping up a bat. In the bottom left, we can see a Stratoviper who has been kicked by Jinx, who's cropped between the cover to 284 and 283, and there are 4 smaller Joes in the background. Lifeline, Stalker. I think, who's all the way on the right under that bat finger?
I think that is Sightline.
Okay. I thought it was Night Force Sneak Peek, but Night Force Sneak Peek has gray pants. And then similarly on the top left, right under the A of A Real American Hero, this was a little hard for me to figure out because it's a little bit of a Spider-Man pose.
Yeah.
It's a little bit of a, Batman swinging from building to building pose, and less of a, it's not a Joe in a jetpack. It's a Joe with a giant like rope for swinging or cable. And because there's this really dramatic sunset behind everyone on the previous cover, there's a very strong yellow and pink highlight on the left side of everything on this cover. And so I just sort of had a hard time figuring out who this character was, and the colors very vaguely reminded me of like an Alex Ross Battle of the Planets cover from like 2005. It's like I'm seeing like a white helmet and a red visor and green gloves or something, and then I squinted and I realized it's Alpine.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, definitely Alpine. We did have CoverGirl, I believe it was, swinging on the very first cover of this puzzle piece. So we do have two people doing the G.I. Joe swing.
I think like Joes don't just have to do their specialty, right? So CoverGirl can swing. It doesn't just have to be one of the mountain folks, right? It doesn't have to be hit and run and Alpine. At the same time, put one of these folks in a jetpack. My overall comment, it's very exciting to have, I think this is coincidental, but the week that the Snake Eyes movie is released to theaters, to have, since the Rob Liefeld Snake Eyes miniseries has wrapped up, right? So, and you don't need the synchronicity of a Snake Eyes comic book to come out, the week of the Snake Eyes movie. A week before, after, the month before, after, close enough, right? If there's stuff to buy for people who are curious. But it is fun that here's this very exciting full body cover, sort of front and center. He's got his sword and his machine gun, and he's chopping up some cobras. Image of Snake Eyes lunging at you on this cover. At the same time, my overall comment for this is similar to my reaction from the previous three parts of this cover, which is I think you would compose this differently if this were all of these characters doing the same stuff just on this cover by itself. And for being a horizontal panoramic shot, the artist becomes aware of like keeping characters away from the left and right seams, and maybe having sort of more negative space in the top third for logos. I like this cover. I think Freddie Williams II would have drawn this with a slightly stronger composition if it was all of these same things just as a freestanding cover.
Okay, and then with the retailer incentive cover is by someone who I'm not familiar with, Vic Hollins. So that could be Victor or Victoria. I don't know if it's incredibly sexist of me to sort of put my own sort of bias on there and think that possibly there's a slight feminine style to it. I mean, the signature looks like it's kind of got a heart to it. So I imagined it's a lady artist.
So this cover is really unusual for G.I. Joe for three reasons. One, we've almost never had a close-up of a black female on a G.I. Joe cover. There was a character in the like post-Revolution, like the Revolution run in the other IDW continuity, and in the Chuck Dixon run, Doc was an African-American woman. But Joe has always had black guys, but not black women. So this is unusual in terms of demographics. Two, this is very much a portrait, and we don't often have G.I. Joe covers that are portraits. Mike Zeck's cover to 53 is a portrait, and then a couple weeks ago we were talking about the Herb Trimpe cover to, I'm sorry, I forget, but an issue early on in the IDW continuation of A Real American Hero, right? Snake Eyes with the Arashikaje logo behind him. But in terms of, a portrait tends to be head and shoulders and is often a little bit more about, depicting the emotions of the person being photographed or drawn rather than sort of the pose and the environment. And we very rarely have a portrait, right? If, oftentimes we have a character standing full body or a bunch of characters rushing into battle. So this is unusual. Also, this character's facing left, and most comic book covers in America, characters are facing right. And lastly, and most of all, this is colored pencil and pastel. So it's not quite painted. I think there's a little bit of wet media, but that might be like using a brush with some water to create a little bit of texture in these dry and waxy media. But it is a kind of painted cover, and yet it still has black outlines. So it's this sort of midway between a painted cover that doesn't have black outlines and a traditionally drawn, like, quote, inked cover that does have black outlines. And, and it's a close-up of our new character. So the fact that we see her metal hand and metal shoulder is sort of like half of the import of this cover, right? Even if you don't know who this character is because you're not up on the comic, you know that this is someone involved in the G.I. Joe story. It's some new Joe or Cobra or like scientist because, they've got a metal arm.
What strikes me about this cover is that it looks slightly two-dimensional, and there's a few kind of tells for that. The gun that she's holding is completely side on. You don't see any of the any of the other aspects to it. It is just like a 2D version of the gun. The her human hand that's supporting is kind of hidden behind the robot hand and aspects. I think of the layout of the torso below the neck sort of seem a little bit weird in terms of the layout. I don't like to be mean, but this one isn't for me. It sort of strikes me as maybe a very young artist still finding their feet and sort of high school art project portraiture level, to be honest. Sorry to be mean, but yeah, not for me.
I feel this Vic cover looks a little amateur, almost surprising that it was published, but it looks like something you would see from an art student or even on the various online art sites. A little surprised it's being used as a cover. However, that's no slight for the artist, because I think the artist is on the right track. If I would critique this as an art director, there are some definite elements you can work with in there. I think the face is very well done. Always found eyes for myself are a very hard thing to draw, and so I think there was a good job done there, although maybe a little overboard on those eyelashes. All that said, like I said, I think this artist is on the right track. Maybe in 2 years from now, she'll knock her socks off.
So I found a website, firstname.lastname.com, Vic Hollins. Vic is in Arizona and does artwork that is similar to what we're seeing here. Some illustrations, some oil paintings, some murals, a little bit of comic book work. And yes, a young artist. And I think the softness of this and the texturing, because it feels so different from traditional paint in comic book covers or traditional line art in comic book covers and interiors, I think that's a big part of what makes this so different. I appreciate the effort to bring in someone new and who may have a following that's completely different from the normal like IDW following. I do think this artist is going to get better, and I would call this a good cover, but not quite ready for prime time. Some of the outlines and some of the details in like the knuckles on the metal hand could show a little more confidence in rendering rather than sort of the shorthand of an outline. So I like that it's different and good effort, but doesn't quite feel like a G.I. Joe cover.
Yeah. I was going to say, and from the website, Vic is a lady. There we go. Just to clear that up. Let's not spend so much time on this, but we have got a convention exclusive by Dave Johnson, which features Caseload, Sherlock, and Bottom Line, with an explosive G.I. Joe packaging style backdrop. Dave Johnson, one of my favorite artists, very competent, maybe not the most exciting of images, perhaps. The second one is featuring new Joes that were introduced in the last issue, Multo and Black Hat. This art is by Philippine artist Roy Mercado, featuring, suitably enough, given the character of Multo here on his first cover. So, quite a nice, modern, glossy style. And these can be found on the IDW website, I believe, if you want to track them down. The back covers also feature file cards for these 5 new characters.
File cards written by Larry Hama.
Dun dun dun! Excellent, yeah.
I think that is a great bonus, right? It's not just the front cover art. It's something that a certain kind of Joe fan or a toy collector would really want to get. Dave Johnson has very occasionally swooped in to the world of G.I. Joe with a couple covers from the beginning of the IDW run, or was that early on in the IDW run, which I think actually were pre-existing art. And he was he was applying to be the character designer on G.I. Joe Renegades, but did not get that job. But there is some artwork out there by Dave Johnson. Mm-hmm. He's someone who, if he just became the regular cover artist, I would be very excited. And he would never, I'm sure, draw a full issue, but that would also be very exciting. Yeah. I'm pleased that there are some convention covers for this summer, because that shows a certain confidence in people getting out and about and going to conventions, and then if you can't or you don't feel comfortable, that they're still available on the IDW website. If I was at a convention and these were easy to get, if there wasn't a very long line, I would get these. Though I'm not a cover variant guy. Yeah. I'll make an exception for Joe.
And also they don't have a crazy price point, which helps. Excellent. So let's get into discussing this and start with a plot breakdown. The G.I. Joe team of Roadblock, Lady J, Black Hat, Multo, and Chuckles have made it back to the Republic of Pang Chan and are joined by Sherlock and Bottom Line to sift for clues at Al Kawbra's warehouse. The investigation is cut short by the detonation of explosive ordnance hidden in the barrel that the warhead had been sat on previously. Al Kawbra is at the airport getting ready to leave when the Joes tracing his credit card purchase of a pizza set off his alerts. After dispatching a customs inspector, he sends a team to the pizzeria. They arrive just in time to launch an attack on the Joes, who take them out without too much trouble. The Joes track them back to the airport just in time to walk into another explosive trap, but discover that Al Kawbra has another 3 warheads which are tracked back to the docks and secured. Meanwhile, via ticket-swapping shenanigans, Al Kawbra is able to make his getaway to the location of Amara Wapor. To be continued. So let's take it over maybe to our guest to kick things off. Chuck, what are your kind of high-level reactions to this issue?
Overall, it's a non-stop action story, and that's good. I'll also say I think it's great that we're 4 issues into this, and we still have no clear clue on who Al Kawbra is, and we're also following along and guessing and trying to figure things out, and being entertained. So can't ask for much more than that. I do think the 5 new characters that Hama has brought in, he wanted to bring these characters in. they're a little more inspired. He has a definite role for him, and it seems like he likes writing them. I find that a little more entertaining and inspiring as opposed to him introducing, say, Charbroil in 1988. I feel these characters are introduced for a purpose, and that's good.
My top down, I guess, was that we've seen. This is part 4. We've seen issues where we've had differing styles, but progressing at quite a breakneck speed. We had an intro where with the introduction of Andrew Lee Griffiths, great art, kicking off the art. It's the introduction of Sherlock, this sort of desert set, army based, convoy confrontation. Then we're into part 2, an entirely different scene. Now we're in the Senate, and there's all of those Senate shenanigans and the mysterious invasion of who we would think would be Al Kawbra into their different style, very packed issue again. Then we're into part 3 with S.L. Gallant on art, providing some of the best art that he's done on the book, a real kind of action, adventure. And then we're into this 4th part, and it just feels like the brakes have been hit, somewhat. That we're returning back to the scene of the previous issue, and it's a lot more of a quiet, slowed down pace, and it's a much more of with shifting genres again. It's maybe more of a procedural investigation, sifting through the clues. So I think there's a little bit of disappointment. Just in terms of, it feels like we're not progressing at that same breakneck speed that we have for the previous 3 parts, that we've gone back to the scene of the previous issue. My expectation would have been, the way that it finished before, that we'd never head back to Pang Chang again for this arc. But here we are, and as Chuck said, it could have easily been glossed over with a kind of a summary box, a little bit of exposition.
I really enjoyed this issue and thought that it did proceed at a breakneck speed, because I can't think of any other issue of G.I. Joe where the Joes or anyone is in a room doing something, and then someone says, "There's a bomb, get out," and they run out and the bomb explodes, and then 8 pages later they're in another room and someone says, "There's a bomb, get out," and they all run out and a bomb goes off. I found that the pacing of this issue, I mean, there wasn't a chase scene the way that there was in a previous part of this story, but I thought there was so much back and forth with Sherlock figuring out sort of each linear step of the puzzle. Page 3, everyone get out, and then page 5. Fire up the vamp. You're making a pizza run, right? And then we have this quick scene with Al Kawbra, and then it keeps. I found this in terms of setting, skipping along from scene to scene. Good guys doing this, good guys doing that, bad guys doing this. This reminded me, as I think as much of this arc has for some readers, this reminded me of an issue of Special Missions. Right. This one wasn't as self-contained as, say, chapter 1 and chapter 3 of this arc, but regular Kobra isn't in it. We just see the symbol 2 or 3 times. The Joes are not in costume, which is always going to remind me of is it Special Missions 10 or 11, where there's like a Roadblock and 2 other Joes on the cover. Like was it Roadblock's in like a bowler hat and has an umbrella? Regular G.I. Joe is international, and so was G.I. Joe Special Missions. But G.I. Joe Special Missions always felt particularly international to me. I mean, besides the like baseball issue and the American hostage issue, and that we have, a scene like on an airplane, and a scene in a warehouse, and a scene in a hangar. This all felt very international to me, right? We've got all these new Joes who are different. I was intrigued that Al Kawbra at the end, we seem to know a little bit more about him because he's not in the same kind of disguise, right? We can, on the final page, because I think this is him, right? Because there's a little bit of him pretending to be other people as the issue wraps up. So this is starting to be a reveal, right? It's like, well, he doesn't have a mustache, for example. My lingering question is, what is the assassination of the title? Is that something that is going to happen in part 5 or get foiled in part 5? Is that something that was almost going to happen in, was it chapter 2 in the Senate?
Yeah, I mean, we've got one assassination there. If as the fallback position, if there isn't a future one, it was the senator. Is he called Lartner? The old,
yes, thank you.
The old one. He got killed off, didn't he, at the end?
Yes. That, in the moment, that didn't feel like a big enough assassination, because that character we hadn't met before, has not been referred to since, and was, I think, Hama like tying up a loose end. It's like, oh, well, he was in cahoots with Kawbra, and so like, Kawbra takes him out, if I'm remembering correctly.
Yeah.
So I wonder if will there be an attempted assassination in chapter 5? But B, is it more likely that when Hama rewrote some of the story, I think particularly chapter 2, after the real life events of January 6th in Washington, D.C., did the murder and the assassination in this story shift or change? Or sort of as a corollary, in the Larry Hama writing style of making it up as he goes along, did he come up with a title and sort of like hope he would come up with an assassination and an attempted murder, and sort of, and I do not mean this in a lighthearted or joking way.
No. I think I'm on the same page as you.
Did he not get around to it? And like, like Hama has, I mean, he said in interviews like, oh, it was sort of always hard to do like a story arc, like, part 1 of 3 or part 1 of 5. And I if you read the plots for like upcoming issues, the issues often then didn't line up with that, because it's like, we need something for the catalog for the issue that's coming out in 2 months. It's like, well, I guess someone will use the vamp and attack Kawbra headquarters, right? And it's like, by the time he gets to writing that issue, that's not what he's doing. So I wonder if the script evolved past this initial sort of staking a claim to a dramatic and specific title. And if so, I'm a little disappointed in that I think Hama could pull off a really cool attempted assassination, but also, like, he has earned a lot of leeway in writing this book the way that he wants, and I'm not going to be disappointed if, like, the title says there's going to be an attempted assassination. It's like, no, I'm still getting, like, exciting G.I. Joe stories.
Yeah, well, I mean, like this Silent Option limited series, for example.
Right.
That title doesn't seem to make an awful lot of sense, to be honest. There wasn't really much exploration of that idea of there being this, silent option, or so again, possibly a case where there's a title with maybe a little bit of thought behind it, but then the story takes a different path and the title's not fully explored or explained.
Also, I'm happy to be slightly misled by the title and then be along the ride for twists and turns. Like, I don't need this to be I'm going to lazily poke fun at Brian Michael Bendis. If this were like, I don't know, Ultimate Spider-Man in like the final couple of years of Bendis's run on Ultimate Spider-Man, if this arc was called Murder by Assassination, there'd be 6 chapters, and the first 3 issues would be like the Kingpin talking with someone else in like New York government about how he's going to assassinate someone. And then meanwhile, we like cut back and forth to Peter talking for pages and pages with like Aunt May. And then in like chapter 5, Peter's like, I have to stop this assassination. And then in chapter 6, he very slowly does. By the way, I read that whole run and I like that book. So I am making fun. But I'm happy to be misled and misdirected, whether fairly or not, for the sake of like twists and turns in a fast-moving G.I. Joe story. I don't need this spelled out in chapter 1. Like Cobra Commander, like, we're going to take out the president. Like, that would also be cool, but I don't need it. Oh, I also think that, with 3 covers or 5 covers, the information that's on any one cover becomes less important. And if you think back to like crossovers or multi-part stories before the era of variant covers, like an X-Men crossover, Executioner's Song, or Maximum Carnage, right? It's like Maximum Carnage, part 1 of 12, Maximum, or 16, Maximum Carnage, part 2. That's like on every cover in the same font. By the time you're collecting cover B and cover RI and cover con exclusive A and B, those other covers don't say Murder by Assassination on the bottom. And I think and because the covers aren't carrying forward this plot element, the cover B is like the Joes defending the mall in Washington, D.C. So I think we also sort of, as readers, kind of lose this thread.
Yeah, because that in terms of the way that the story is teed off at the end of, I think it's the end of part 1 where Sherlock is in the hospital. They sort of talk about a conspiracy in DC. So it could be that in the early genesis of this story, it was maybe planned to be, or thought to be quite a different story and much more DC focused, which maybe was the direction then the Freddie Williams was kind of given for this joining cover, which was only really explored in part 2.
I'm also, in terms of if January 6th caused Larry Hama, we know it caused Larry Hama to change, whether directly or indirectly. I don't know if he decided on his own or he spoke with someone at IDW, but he posted online like, "Oh, I'm going to change this story that I'm writing." I'm a little disappointed because I think that original story could have been great. But what's so interesting to me is, what can this writer pull off, having to some extent come up with a story and then in it needing to change gears? It's like, this is part of what shows to me that Larry Hama is a talented writer, right? It's like, oh, what's his plan B? Or, oh, okay, well, he makes it up as he goes along. Well, he was making it up as he goes along on that one path. Now we're going to watch him make it up as he goes along on this other path. And it's turning out pretty well, And also, if chapter 5 ends up being a dud, I can just say like, well, it's because he had to change gears at chapter 2. Yes, you do both of you make good points that there have been some attempts on characters' lives in chapters 1 and 2, even if for me they don't quite rise to the level of assassination, because assassination is just a murder, is a murder of someone prominent, right? Like, if some character in a movie is like, anyway, you can cut that last sentence. You all know what that word means.
Thanks there, Tim. In Dictionary Corner, a question that I had, and this is a big, significant, thematic question about that has far-reaching consequences. A question that I had reading this particular issue was: does Al Kawbra strike you as the kind of guy who would do his own pizza run?
Chuck?
I think the pizza run interjects a little bit of humor and realism into it. Even the bad guys have to eat sometimes. And it's a little tongue-in-cheek and kind of funny in the usual Hamaism that he's doing something like this, having him order a pizza. Because you never see bad guys, or good guys for that matter, in comic books or action movies ever stopping to eat or go to the bathroom. I can just imagine like Avengers Endgame at the end, they show up and Avengers are all there to fight Thanos. All of a sudden Thor says, excuse me, I gotta go take a leak. So it's a little kind of humorous realism.
Yeah, the way that he dispatches people, including people that on his own team. I'd expect him to be more than happy to be bossing people about and sending them down to the pizza shop to pick up his pizza rather than doing himself and putting it on his own personal credit card.
I wonder if this is Hama writing backwards from a problem. It's like, okay, I need to give some breadcrumb for the Joes to trace him. Like, okay, well, he got away with the nuke and he swapped clothes with the so-and-so, and then he swapped places with someone else and he's not on that plane. Like, oh, the pizza. and that might be sort of inelegant and too transparent, but at a certain point, like, we do see the machinery of the storytelling. It's like Sherlock sure knows what to do. Like, every moment. Like, get the DOD to stop that plane. Like, Chuckles, go over here. Like, everyone jump on the vamp. But yes, now that you say it, that does seem beneath the station of this sort of villainous leader type mastermind.
And we're given a big clue about his identity by his pizza choice. So you read in and what kind of guy would order the ingredients that he's asked for. He's got a special pie, which when you're in Southeast Asia often means that it's got some narcotics crumbled on the top. But I don't know if it means that in this context. A special pie with pineapple on top of a pizza. Pineapple, lapchong, and kimchi, which is an unconventional pizza.
I think the ingredients and making such a big deal out of it reminded me of something like the Dreadnoks would do in the writings of G.I. Joe. Like, they would always have a reference to the grape soda, and just like, it was a dead giveaway. Oh, that's the Dreadnoks. So I thought this kind of playing that up. I didn't catch a clue out of it, but I thought it was a little odd, if not interesting.
And similarly, while we're talking about food that Al Kawbra likes to eat, on page 2, Sherlock is sniffing his takeout and said, "This is local food doused with stinky fermented fish sauce." This is what the indigenous thugs were eating. Oh, okay. So it's right. That food is the other guy's food.
Yeah.
But yes, this issue does take a couple panels out to have food be a part of the story or motivation or the sort of breadcrumb trail.
Chuck, do you have some theories on who it might be? Do you think it's an all new original character, or do you think it's an existing character? And if so, who might it be?
I kind of think it would probably be Firefly. That just feels like something that would happen. We haven't seen Firefly in a while, and this could just very well be a new identity for the guy. I will say that, if this had been Devil's Due, however, I feel like they would have picked a C-level character or some random background character and then bring them back as Al Kawbra. That would feel like a very Devil's Due kind of thing. So I hope it's not some C-level character. For instance, like Clutch's buddy from issue 20 in New Jersey. If that turned out to be Al Kawbra, I would roll my eyes. Oh, it's a very Devil's Due move.
Yeah, bubbling away at the top of our list, I think, as well. Firefly with my option 2 being Major Blood, not Major Blood, Black Major as my secondary choice. But yeah, could even be Major Blood with his moustache shaved off.
When I got to the final page and we see who I think is Al Kawbra now in a new disguise and more of his face is visible, but now he's wearing gloves, or he's wearing gloves again, and he's in a white hat and a white suit. Wait, am I reading this right? Did he swap clothes with someone a second time to get into this?
I don't know if it says
I admit I traded my passport and ticket with some guy. Okay, no. So this, I think this is just Al Kabra's. This is just what he's wearing for this scene.
And it's quite similar to what he wore in part 2 as well.
Okay, thank you for that reminder. When I got to this final page, I sort of, for a moment, I racked my brains and I thought, is there something in this outfit, in the details, like it's a hat, or he's got this kind of glasses, or he's got this kind of gloves, or the color of the gloves, or the sort of paperwork that he's holding. Is there something that I'm supposed to see which can give me a hint as to who he is, whether or not it's a character that we know? Like, if he had like a green handkerchief, or, if the, if his tie had like a certain pin on it. And I got to the final panel and I thought, no, either there isn't a clue here or I'm not like smart enough to get it. And I think I brought this up when we did chapter 2. It's also possible that as of writing chapter 4 of 5, writer Larry Hama doesn't know who Al Kawbra is, or has like 2 or 3 choices and sort of settles on one of them while he's writing chapter 5. And that's an exciting and risky kind of writing. I suspect Hama knows who this is by chapter 4, but there's another connection to Kobra in this issue. This is also one of my I Spies, because the cargo plane that's sort of white, green, and red, and also the like dark gray. I guess it's sort of a Humvee or like armored car.
Jeep thing, yeah.
Thank you. Both of them have a variation of the Kobra logo on them, and help me out here. Is this the like Stratoviper Kobra logo? Is it the Kobra logo with the extra wings on the sides?
Yeah. Does this appear on the Rattler?
Yes. That is the Rattler variation of the Kobra insignia. So when I saw this on that plane, I thought two things at the same time. One, like in the world of G.I. Joe, if you see a Kobra logo, like Kobra isn't top secret. Like in issue 156, they like take over the White House, right? Like people know who Kobra is. So if you see a Kobra logo and you're a regular person in the world of the G.I. Joe comics, you'd run the other way. And so is it sort of trying to have it both ways, where that sort of Kobra logo is for us the same way that like when an ArmaGEEKdon truck or one of these other Kobra anagrams is like dropped into the background, like we the reader know what it is, and like the Joes don't know what it is, and none of the regular population knows what it is. So on the surface I thought, oh, that's some kind of Kobra plane, and oh, that's some kind of Kobra armored Jeep thing. But also, why is it the Stratoviper version? Is that Hama or Andrew Lee Griffith making like a small mistake, or is there something extra in that? Like, oh, is El Kawbra, is it Wild Weasel? Like probably not, but is it something to do with the Kobra Air Corps?
And and it's quite a big red flag that this is Kobra sort of open, working in quite the open. The plane company is called Nuguhea, Nguhea, which is Thai for Cobra. They've got these big Cobra logos on their vehicles, so it doesn't, it seems not very inconspicuous. And I wonder to the extent that maybe the direction in the script is of that sort of winged Cobra and copying it from the Rattler, or whether that's entirely artist interpretation. It might be that another artist would have potentially done something more subtle rather than it being, an in-your-face Cobra with wings. Would be interesting to know that or not, because you'd expect this team to want to be inconspicuous. So get my conspicuous and inconspicuous. You'd want them to be inconspicuous in the way that they would operate and to act somewhat in secret. So to have a giant great Cobra slapped on the side of your vehicles doesn't seem particularly stealthy way of operating.
Yeah.
The discussion that we were having earlier as well prompted me for another thought on who potentially Al Kawbra could be. So this is my choice number 3. This could be Scrap Iron. Was it, Chuck, you were talking about sort of, the type of thing that Devil's a Jew would be, picking out some C-lister characters from the roster and making use of them. And Scrap Iron's a well-loved character. I know that certain people would probably be writing in saying, well, why not? Why don't we get to use Scrap Iron again? He has got blue signifiers on his outfit, just in the way that Al Kawbra has got a blue hood and tie. He wears sunglasses. He's a character that's not really being used a huge amount, so it'd be nice to see him come back. And he's also a character that specializes in things that go boom, which is one of Al Kawbra's specialities in terms of having that big rack of explosives around him on the bandolier, and having all of these warheads dotting around. So it sounds credible.
I don't think I'd be okay if it's Scrap Iron. I don't think I want it to be Scrap Iron, because though you lay out some parallels, Scrap Iron works for Destro, right? He's an armament guy. He's a weapons developer, and he's part of Cobra, or he's part of Mars. So yes, he is a kind of terrorist. There's nothing in the G.I. Joe backstory that Scrap Iron is a leader, and if he's an inventor, I think of him more like a follower, not in a bad way, but he works for Destro or he works for Cobra Commander. So if there are hints, I haven't been getting them. In general, whoever El Kawbra might be. And I think at this point, I'd actually be most satisfied if he is no one in particular. He's just a new character. And he's just a new character who keeps his identity secret. And he becomes another sort of, Destro, Black Major, or Dr. Mindbender or Dr. Venom character who either leads his own faction that somehow relates to Cobra or ends up working for Cobra. But I feel like there isn't enough ground laid for it to be like Xandar or like Scrap Iron, such that a reveal 1 month from now, I'd say, yeah, that's it. Like at this point, and I know these characters are not a lot of people's favorites. At this point, if like next issue, it's some like sort of undercover blue ninja that is like mastered speech and doesn't sound like a robot and doesn't go like bzzzt or doesn't have like tics, like that sort of feels in keeping with like, well, who could this be? Because I know a lot of people who it maybe shouldn't be.
One wildcard theory, however, it could be Billy, Cobra Commander's son and Storm Shadow's former apprentice. That seems like it's something that Hama would actually dig down and pull out. And I'm trying to remember the exact issue that Billy died, but I think he died right at the time of the Blue Ninja's first appearance. So I could see something, how this would tie into not only this arc, but it could also pay off the Blue Ninja stuff that's been driving us crazy for the past few years. So that would be exciting if it is Billy. Also, Billy's he has a artificial leg and artificial eye that could tie into the artificial limbs of both Sherlock and Sightline. Like I said, this feels like something Hama might do. I don't put too much weight into this theory, though, because I think it's kind of a wild card one.
I do like that theory, though. Excellent.
I want to go back to that one little observation I made about how this feels like an issue of Special Missions, and the Joes aren't in their costume, although I'm reminded looking at page 1 that Chuckles is, but, Chuckles' costume is sort of a joke because it's, like he's undercover, but he like obviously sticks out, and yet, some guy on a plane in a Hawaiian shirt, it's like, oh, that's just someone. Anyway, I do wish that there was a way to get more of the Joes into costume in this issue. And I know it doesn't quite make sense because they're on a certain kind of mission and they're in a hurry and there hasn't been a lot of time since the last issue. But, since the last issue, like Roadblocks ended the last issue like having cocktails on a ship in the ocean. And, his costume it's not like fatigues. Like Roadblocks, like version 2 and I guess it'd be version 4, the one that's sort of like Aqua from like 90, 2 or 3. Like those don't jump out to me as like this guy is in the military. And Lady J's like civilian or sort of undercover clothes here are like close enough. She's got a hat, she's wearing green, but I just always want to see the Joes in their costumes. Like if they're all going underwater, they can all be in wetsuits. But at the same time, and this would be dumb, but I would really enjoy it. I'd love it if they were all in wetsuits that were somehow color-coded to their costumes, Like, let's give Roadblock his 1986 vest.
Yeah, and in the previous issue, they were undercover, so it made sense that they weren't in their costumes. But in this issue, it's them doing, looking back at the crime scene. There's less reason that they couldn't just be in their in their proper outfits. Really.
And I'm fine, sort of splitting the difference. I'm fine if Black Hat and Multo, it's like they can keep wearing what they were wearing before because we haven't quite established their costumes as if they were to get an action figure, But like I need a little more. I need a little bit of gear or like a little more splash of color, a couple accents, like a belt or something.
Okay. Should we do some I Spy, looking at the little details that we noticed?
Yeah.
I spy with my little eye.
Chuck, was there anything that you noticed in the details that you wanted to shout out?
I couldn't find too many unusual details. I'm glad you guys pointed out that winged Cobra logo because I didn't notice that the first time through.
I spy reoccurring new Joes, and it seems like Larry is having lots of fun exploring the story with these new characters as the driving force.
Yeah, that's a good point. They can organically inform the story or lead the story.
Yeah, and you know, clearly he's having fun playing with these new Joes that you know, they're very very much a part of this arc, and it's been hinted that they will be coming back as, you know, I think it's part 2 of the Spotlight issues in the future. I've seen some criticism that it doesn't necessarily feel like a G.I. Joe issue because I guess they're out of costumes, and with the exception of Chuckles and Lady J and Roadblock, they're all these brand new characters. But I don't have any sort of issue with that. I mean, enjoying the introduction of these new characters and seeing where the story takes them. It's a break from the Blue Ninjas. I spotted the return of the battered yellow van from the previous issue, complete with dents to the front and bullet holes in the side from Roadblock shooting his Marjuice through the side earlier on. So nice to have that little bit of continuity. They probably got to return it to the rental place in this location. In Panchang as well. So there's that. The other little thing that I saw was that we have Lady J in disguise as an air hostess, which is a repeat of something that happened in the Special Missions preview all the way back in G.I. Joe issue 50, where she foils a terrorist plot by sneaking on board a plane disguised as a air hostess.
I spy the Vamp. The Vamp Mark 1 makes a return to G.I. Joe comics.
It does.
And
indeed.
I think it fits here because, you know, if it was the Havoc or, you know, the Desert Fox, something more ostentatious, you know, like driving around the streets in these warehouses, I feel like, you know, this just sort of just looks like there are 2 giant guns on the back, but I feel like this can blend in more with civilian traffic in the warehouse district.
And probably the first time that the Vamp has been employed to full you know, terrorists full of lead in quite the way that it has here. You know, a potential hammerism that I spotted in conjunction with the Vamp was when it's shooting these guys at the docks. Sherlock says, "Nicely done, Molto. Roadblock didn't even have to unlimber the heavy artillery." So, you know, Roadblock's just sitting there in the passenger seat with his Marjuice unfired. I suspect that's Larry there using the dialogue to just explain something away that he noticed in the art that would otherwise perhaps you know, call attention to what's Roadblock doing.
This panel was sort of halfway to an error detected for me because the Vamp's rear gun is traversed downward, and the 2 bad guys on the right are getting perforated, but Molto is also high up on the Vamp using his sidearm, and the sound effects, blam, 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 sort of looks like he fired to the left and then he moved his arm and fired to the right, and yet the perspective on the 4 shots going through the middle bad guy line up with the Vamp gun. So I look at this panel and I wonder, is there a missing sound effect for the Vamp gun firing that would be something bigger than blam blam?
Potentially there's a missing sound effect for the Vamp, but it make the 2 blam blams either side of Molto make sense in terms of the guy on the far left being shot with the arrows leading towards Molto, and then the way he's aiming now at towards the right sort of indicates, I guess, that he has shot and then moved and then shot again. So it reads okay to me.
Again, but if Molto is, if it's sort of like left and right, if he's shooting in both directions, then the Vamp doesn't also need to be firing. This panel's a little confusing for me in sort of the like second to second continuity, that either it's missing a sound effect or the like it's mostly that it's missing a sound effect. And speaking of sound effects, I have an error detected 2 panels earlier. The 3 bad guys. This is page 16, panel 3. And so is a gaggle of local thugs, yells Balto as the vamp is driving toward us. There's a weird double printing of the sound effect for the 3 bad guys firing their weapons. Brap. So I can't read it. And then on the next page, the final panel, this is page 17, panel 5, Roadblock is standing and holding his giant gun, and the sound effect of him cocking it the sound effects is filled in dark gray, and it almost disappears, but there's a ka-chunk that's printed right on top of his gun that you can't see because the bottom of his gun is black. And I don't know if that's a lettering mistake or a coloring mistake or a production mistake, but it's a tiny, tiny thing that totally bums me out. And I'm going to send an email to letters@idwpublishing.com and ask them to fix that for the trade. I'll also tell them that the issue was great.
Excellent. There used to be a pudding that was over-egged. You know the pudding. You know the pudding. At first it was British, but then it was Commonwealth. You know the pudding. You know the pudding. But now there's a new player in town, a comic book writer of some renown. He's using real world examples and peppering the issues with lots of samples. It's a Larry Hammer colloquialism. He's talking G.I. Joe and all its heroism. Can you guess what it is? Is it something new? Now listeners, Larry drops a slice of real life on you.
I had a colloquialism, and that was sibilance, which is a great word. Does anyone from the class know what sibilance is?
Yeah, we talk about this when my animation students do their recording. Sibilance is that's the fancy word for the S sound in speech. And when you're recording into a microphone, you either want like a guard or a mic screen so that you don't overmodulate your audio or like spit onto your microphone. And in this scene, it's Sherlock tracking some of the evidence from Kawbra.
Yeah, it's she's looking because of the sibilance in his speech. She thought that it might mean that there's some DNA that's been left on his phone. I had an example of sibilance, which I'll take off my pop guard to make this more effective, perhaps. Sadly, Serpentor sold 7 venomous serpents to Storm Shadow in San Francisco.
Very good. Very good.
Thank you.
Do you have do we do favorite lines of dialogue?
Quote of the week, 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 quote of the week.
My favorite line is when the customs officer at the airport, the guy in white who ends up getting shot in the head, is holding a green booklet, a sheaf of paper, and he's yelling at Kawbra. These flight plans are ridiculously vague. I can't possibly approve for takeoff. If you want to get your merchandise off the ground, I will require a more substantial gratuity. This is funny because this character is being a jerk, because this character is doing his job but getting in the way of a bad guy. Like, Hama is creating license for the bad guy to do the bad thing, which is kill this guy. You know, it's like the scene in Star Wars where the Moff whoever says to Vader, you know, like your superstitious ways don't buy any credibility, and then, you know, Vader strangles him, right? It's like, well, if he's a jerk, then the audience can sort of root for Darth Vader to be even more of a jerk. But I also appreciate here that, you know, once again, Hama is referring to the business of like physical movement and trade, and like that things have weight, you know, like you can't just like jump on the Avengers Quinjet and fly to the Savage Land. It's like, well, you know, in G.I. Joe, the Savage Land would have like a radio tower, and there'd be like 5 people from the UN making sure that like terrorists don't go to the Savage Land and like take it over, right? And so there's this one panel scene where this airport customs guy, this official, gets in the way of the bad guy and says, no, you have to do some paperwork, or in this case, like, bribe me. And, I sound like a broken record, because it's like, you wouldn't see this in a Punisher comic or a Captain America comic. This is both, like, smart in that it's realistic. It's also funny, but it also, in terms of, like, the gears behind the machinery of writing, it gives this bad guy more of an excuse to shoot this guy, which is shocking because, like the background of that next panel is all red, and he shoots him in the head, and Andrew Lee Griffith, it's all silhouetted, but he draws blood, right? So for what this line of dialogue represents, even though that's not really what the issue is about, I like the business of putting this roadblock in the way of the bad guy.
Cool. My favourite line was the one with the sibilants. I heard him shouting when he ambushed my convoy near the Truchel-Bismarck border. A lot of sibilants in his speech. I bet there's saliva on that mouthpiece. A nice use of words that I wasn't familiar with, and a sort of a good sort of line into their investigation, which we haven't yet seen resolved. So that phone is being sent away. So could that be part of the resolution in part 5? We will find out.
Also, something that the three of us didn't refer to so far in this episode, we were all happy in the previous episode when the Joes take out that nuke. There are 3 more nukes,
which seemed to be resolved very, very quickly, right? That they got to the docks, and I think they stopped them at the docks.
Yes. So I guess my point is that Kawbra is in this issue with him sneaking away sort of 3 different times, 3 different ways. They keep thinking that they've got him.
Yeah.
And he's not there. And it's this guy. Like, oh no, it's not him. He like snuck away. He traded places. He snuck away. That this is escalating. And, we know that Chuckle says, we can have a detail nab him when he deplanes in Manila. And then Sherlock says, I have a bad feeling this is only going to get worse. Right? Like, it's, where is Kawbra going to end up in the next issue? Springfield, Joe headquarters, Manila, somewhere else, Paris.
Well, I don't know. He's in the new location of Amara Wapur at the moment. We shall find out. So let's do our scoring of this. So we do it out of 10. Chuck, why don't you go first? What would your score be for this?
I would score this a 7.
There's some sibilance there in that number that Chuck just recited.
7. Yeah, I'm probably somewhere similar. Yeah, something like a 7. I think it's it's a solid issue, but I don't think it quite lives up to the rest of the issues in the arc.
Yes, this is a 7 for me as well. Sometimes a G.I. Joe issue is the big battle after things have been set up for a couple issues. Sometimes a G.I. Joe issue is the beginning of some new plot threads. Sometimes an issue of G.I. Joe is the continuation of like an A plot and a B plot and like the beginnings of a C plot. There's some Joes like in the Arctic doing something, and then we cut back to the Joes in the desert and they're further along and their thing is like going south. And then like meanwhile back at headquarters, someone's like, I need to talk to you. And like a new plot thread begins. And those issues sometimes feel like transitions where it's all the important business of moving characters and plot forward, but it doesn't feel like a definitive end to a mission or a mini arc. And one of the things that I like about G.I. Joe comics is that these, again, this is my term and it's imperfect, these transition issues are still really satisfying, even if they don't end on like a killer cliffhanger, or even if sort of all 3 subplots still progress and one of them doesn't wrap up. And the previous chapters in this story all felt like parts of a larger story and also really satisfying single issues. This one doesn't quite do that, but that's okay because it is part 4 of 5, and there is enough forward momentum in tracking down El Kawbra, going to different places, Joe's doing what Joe's do, right, which is like take out bad guys, use some gear and Joe vehicles, and then a spotlight for a couple particular Joes who have some expertise. So I like this issue. It's not quite as sweet as the previous couple, but it's a great part 4 of 5, and I look forward to seeing part 5 cap it all off.
And I think that's an interesting point. I intended to talk about is the fact that G.I. Joe often continues with a lot of momentum and almost like, very sharp cuts between, something finishing and something starting again. And this feels somewhat unusual in terms of its, we'd moved on. Joes were on a boat away from Pang Chang, and then we've kind of gone back to the scene of the crime almost, with a revisiting of the previous scene and sort of sifting through it, which seems slightly unusual. But I think most of these issues have been relatively their own thing and interesting different takes. I think, shall we move on to everyone's favourite segment, Innuendo?
Attention. At this moment, you are now listening to
Talking Innuendo.
If you are offended by words like
sucking, flesh wound, willy, Pete, balls, crystal balls, hypno shield,
whatever, take the tape out now. This is not a pop album. And by the way, suck my
grandmother's brick in a Prada handbag.
Yes, Chuck, you have to unmute for this, so Mark can try and make you titter.
Yes. So the purpose of this segment is that I will read out a list of 5 G.I. Joe names, and my intent is to try and make you titter just by pure virtue of the legitimate G.I. Joe name. And I will stop, if I succeed. So 5 or less. Okay, you're both unmuted. Here we go. Clutch. Grand Slam. Short Fuse. Tunnel Rat. Spearhead. And Max.
Last one's pretty good.
Oh dear, I've been foiled yet again. Okay, sorry, it wasn't the strongest, but
yeah, sorry about that. The first 2 names kind of threw me off. I thought of Clutch and Grand Slam. I thought of the bands of the same name. Clutch is one of my favorite bands, by the way, and even Spearhead. I thought of Michael Franti's band, and that kind of threw me off as well. So sorry about that.
I was quite pleased with Tunnel Rat. That one made me mentally titter. But there we go. That's the end of Innuendo and me defeated one more time. Next time on Talking Joe, we will be continuing to read ARA as it comes out. So it will be 285 now, the finale of Murder by Assassination. We will also be covering the Disavowed series as we continue to work through that. We have a special interview, and we will be covering the Frontline series next. So we'll be covering the first 4 issues of that. We also have a awards show covering the first 25 issues of the Devil's Due run, picking out some highlights. So remains for me to say thanks again to Chuck, our special guest today. Go and check out his magnificent website at Option38.com. Thanks for joining us, Chuck.
Thank you for having me. I had an absolute blast. Like I said, this is the first time I've ever been in a podcast, and it was a lot of fun. You guys are great.
Thanks, Chuck. That was great.
Tim, where can people find you?
A realamericanbook.com.
Excellent. Have you got a tease for what people might expect to find coming soon?
Yeah, another G.I. Joe alum, someone who worked on G.I. Joe, died in the last 2 weeks. And I have an interview with him from several years ago, which I thought I would post.
Crikey. It is, you're sort of staked your claim as the G.I. Joe's leading obituary site, unfortunately, but sterling work with those pieces and excellent nuggets and interviews that you feature as part of those highlights of those incredible creators. You can find us on all the usual places. TalkingJoe.co.uk is the website that has links to all of those places. Talking Joe, a G.I. Joe podcast on Facebook, on Twitter, on Instagram. There's links to the emails on the website. We are also on Patreon. That is patreon.com/talkingjoe. Big thanks to the backers there: Richard, Sam, Jay, Bill, Christopher, and Justin, who are all getting early access to episodes as well as some exclusive content. So big thanks again to Chuck for joining us as our guest today. And I think we're done. And as we know, when all is said and done, you can catch us down the road.
Because we've been talking Joe.
And we're all out of Joes. Laters. And that's the end.